So then this blood is sent up to the lungs and the heart where it becomes red. And so that's pretty straight again out of the Ling Shu chapter 81. So other commentators are going to say that it goes to the heart and then to the lungs, and it's in the lungs where it becomes redder. So the red substance, of course, is going to be referring to hemoglobin, right? But it's actually the iron that's red, meaning that's what gives the blood the red color, right? So for example, if you want to take a look at blood in other species, so let's say with crabs, right? So a crab is going to have blue blood instead of red blood because their blood transport mineral is copper, which is going to look blue, right, rather than iron. And shrimp, if you want to look at shrimp, they're going to have green blood because they utilize vanadium as their blood transport mineral, which looks green, right? So at any rate, our blood is red because of the iron, right? So when the iron in the hemoglobin molecule hits oxygen, it binds to 4 oxygen molecules and becomes a much brighter red, right? But in truth, the actual red substance is generated initially from the stomach, which is what the Jiayi Jing, for example, contends, right? But you can also say that once the spleen brings it into the body, then eventually it's going to be stored in the liver. As we say, the liver stores blood, right? So when we say the liver stores blood, we're mainly talking about it storing iron, since the liver, you have the hepatocytes, and then you have the reticuloendothelial cells that eat the old red blood cells, and that's to recycle iron, right? So the liver actually stores and provides the vast majority of iron in the body. And by the way, while we're on the subject, it's kind of interesting that the absorption of iron is very carefully controlled by the body because the body doesn't have a very good intrinsic mechanism to eliminate it, right? And so that's why people with certain diseases like hemochromatosis have to donate blood all the time because they have way too much iron and there's no other way to eliminate the iron from the blood other than bloodletting, which, they call donating. So at any rate, there's a hormone that's been recently discovered, relatively recently discovered, called hepcidin. And hepcidin is produced in the liver when the iron stores are full. And hepcidin essentially tells the body to reduce the absorption of iron. But interestingly, when we look at where hepcidin is produced and when, it's produced in part as a byproduct of inflammation. And so you can see that this is a way the body's trying to limit the amount of iron available to the invaders, right? It wants to limit the availability of iron to bacteria and other types of organisms because they need that, right? And this is one cause, for example, of anemia where it's relatively counterproductive to try to correct through iron supplementation, right? So if you have this situation, then iron supplementation is really the last thing you want to do. But of course, a lot of our patients, when they're diagnosed with anemia or something like that, they don't look and check hepcidin levels or try to figure out why. They just say, no, you need to take iron. You have to get your iron levels up. So again, one way to differentiate is to order a blood or urine hepcidin test. Or you can try to use the pulses, and then you look essentially to see if the patient has a blood deficiency due to heat, right? For example, in which case, if we see that clinically, we don't tonify blood, right? I mean, unless they're, dragging and almost dead, right? Because we need to clear the heat first and then tonify the blood. Because we know that if we start tonifying blood when they have a lot of heat, then you're going to potentially aggravate the heat. You're going to create blood stasis. And so that's kind of the mechanism. So again, you can use pulses, or if you're not good with pulses, then blood tests can be helpful. Okay. At any rate, back to chong mai. So we have this idea of how blood is made now and what the components of it are. And we can look back at chong mai then and ask some questions. So the first question is going to return to this question of why chong mai is referred to as the sea of blood. And to answer this, let's first take a look at marrow and at the hematopoietic stem cells.